So let's review. Now the images I'm about to show you are two different compositions, still using the same still life, just from two different viewpoints. So the first step we did was we mapped out our objects and we created a contoured line drawing of our still life. We then applied 6H values to that still life. We wanted to start to add some light gray values using a 6H pencil. From there, and in our last video, we worked with HB. And HB, since it has a wider range of value application, some that are very light, close to a 6H range, and some that are darker into your softer B pencils, I was able to add a lot more detail and create a lot more texture and form of my objects. My next step is to apply my last pencil, which is 4B. Now 4B is a soft lead pencil, soft graphite. So it's going to give me some darker values. So once again, I want you to take your sketchbook, find a page near the back of our sketchbook that we have done value scales on before. And we want to, again, do a test area on that page. So before, when I did my test area of 6H, I had already labeled an area for 4B. And again, I want to start out with some light pressure. I'm not worried about the circular shading technique right now. This is just a pressure test. And I'm going to, as I come across, start pressing harder and harder until I get to that point where I could possibly be stretching the fibers of my paper and damaging it. Now, any pencil has a range. Some are better than others for contrast. 4B, I can get a lighter value out of it, but you'll notice how dark that value is compared even to my HB pencil up above. Definitely gets more close to what we would consider a black color or a black value in our application. So soft B pencils are great for going into this dark range with our drawing. So far we've worked from around our medium to our lightest values with each pencil so that we can continue to layer pencil on top. Now we're going to go from the darker value, add those in, and carefully fade out into some of our lighter values in this range. So we're going to work on this half. At any time while we are working with shading though, if you need to go back to one of your previous pencils, then please go to it. If you need to slightly increase one of your light values, you can't do that with the HB, go back to the 6H pencil and apply those slightly darker light grays. If you need to go back to HB to adjust some values, go back to HB and adjust those values. Once we move on to another pencil, doesn't mean you quit working with the others. At any time, you can go back and forth between any of the pencils to work with them. So let me show you what I'm going to do with my 4B pencil. Now with working with 4B pencil, I am again going to work in my darker range. I will still want to have that extra sheet of paper so that I can protect my drawing while I am shading. And again, remember that extra piece of paper is just to lay down on top of the area we're working on so that my pencil doesn't rub up against what's already done. 4B is going to give me a lot darker value. So I'm going to first look at objects that are darker in value by looking at them, or even darker in color, because darker colors will read as darker values on a pencil drawing. So one area that's going to stand out is my blue wrapped candy. There's some dark blue on there, there's a lighter blue on there, but compared to some of the other values I have on here or the other colors, it's a darker piece of candy. It's a darker wrapping. So this is one place in which I'm going to come in and start darkening some values. So that could be in some of the areas in which I have wrinkles. I'm going to come in and start applying some darker grays, and if need be, fade out to some lighter grays. This will help start to increase our contrast of our image by having some very dark values, some very light values. That will help create what we call contrast, and contrast is showing a difference. So I'm going to come in and looking at my original wrapped candy, I'm going to look for areas that look very dark and start applying some of those values. Some of those may end up going over top of some of the HB values I've already placed, and some of them may go in areas beside it. So it's what I'm observing today with those value changes. Okay, so you see there where I added some darker values. Again, I'm not going completely crazy with the dark values just because I want it to be slightly darker than some of my other items on there. I'm not always using the full pressure of the 4B with this pencil and applying those values. I've just gone in and I've tried to be careful with my pressure. Yes, areas where I did want to go darker, pressed with a lot more pressure, but I did use some light pressure values. Again, 4B is going to automatically give you some darker values compared to HB and 6H. So even when I work in a lighter pressure, it's going to darken up what's already there. So that's my next step with 4B. You'll notice that it might not take as much time to work with 4B as it did with the HB, because again, we're looking for those small areas where it's really getting dark, where we're really deepening the values and fading out to the light values we already created. So that is our last step. I'm going to work on mine so you can see the process, and then we'll have a conclusion at the end of the video. So let's take a look at my halfway point. You can already notice the difference here in contrast by adding just a little bit of 4B in areas, some candies a little bit more than others. I've now created a little bit more depth to my drawing. Contrast, I'm showing a difference. I have some very light values and I have some very dark values. So as you are working through this process, you want to make sure you keep on developing those 4B values. So I've finished my 4B application. As you can see, it has increased the contrast of my items. I've tried to darken items that have darker color packaging, like the blue fruit chew in the back, the red labeled lollipop in the front. I try to differentiate between the lighter and darker side of the candy of this two-toned, two-flavored candy here, and to put in some of the wrinkles and highlights and reflected areas I'm seeing in the foil packaging of the rollover here. So once I am done with 4B, my last step is to go back and double check everything. Now 4B, being that it is a soft graphite pencil, will leave a little bit of a fuzzy look to your items. It does have troubles when you're working with lighter pressure, working its way down into the fibers of the paper. But in the next video, when I talk about touching up areas and also applying the shadows on the table for our items, we will talk more about how to clean that up and possibly get rid of a lot of that surface texture from the softer graphite pencil laying on top. So that is your job during this next process, is to apply your 4B pencil to get your darker gray values, your almost black area values, to increase your contrast. You'll notice there wasn't as much for me to fill in this time around as there was with HB. As I said before, HB should have done most of the work for identifying a lot of your value changes. 4B is just there to add the very dark parts. 6H was there to help you with the very light parts. So in our next video, we're going to talk about how to clean this up a little bit more, hopefully reduce some of that texture of the softer graphite laying on top of the paper, and start applying the shadow of the items underneath them.